Okay, Christian Ethics Part 2. My voice is back a little bit. Still under the weather. Okay, so last week we spoke about moral relativism, moral objectivism, right? Relativism, moral relativism, or ethical relativism, which is the idea there's no absolute standard of right and wrong, you know, end justifies the means, whatever. By the way, you want to know something that you can say when someone says the end justifies the means? Ask them if killing 4 homeless to feed 500 people, if that's justified.
Or stealing a wallet just to get a lunch.
Yeah. The point there is when you're pushing it to its logical extreme, for example, like cannibalizing on the homeless, right? The point is that when you phrase it that way, if it doesn't have the ring of truth and it's sort of what we call counterintuitive against one's intuition, it's counterintuitive, 9 out of 10 times it's probably false, if not 10 out of 10. Moral objectivism or absolutism. There exists a moral law that transcends humanity. The 10 Commandments, for example, would be part of moral objectivism or moral absolutism. And they're not subject to change. Rape will be wrong forever. It wasn't just wrong back in the day and wrong today and might be justified tomorrow, granted that the masses vote differently. Truth doesn't change, moral truth doesn't change, regardless of the knower, regardless of geography and so on. Now, remember that there's 2 types of relativism I want you to recall from last week. When we talk about, you can't just use the word relativism. In context you can, because there's also what's called knowledge relativism, or the fancy word, epistemological relativism. Remember, knowledge, study of knowledge, episteme, epistemology. So when you say epistemological relativism, it's another way of saying knowledge relativism, which says you can't know anything for sure. That has nothing to do with morality. You know, how is certainty possible? Can you know anything for sure? There is no truth. Those sort of statements would be part of epistemological or knowledge relativism. It's not moral relativism. All right, let's move on. Let me see if I can get that big screen going. It'll be really big now because Lewis actually increased it. All right, how's that one going to work? Oh, much better. All right, real quick here. Moral relativism has various problems. I mentioned some of them last time. Then we'll go as fast as we can. First of all, it's self-refuting. When we say self-refutation or something that's self-refuting, it's a statement that cannot fulfill its own standard. I can't speak a word in English.
You just did.
Oh, 7, right? There is no, you know, I always lie. If I always lie, then that would be the truth. Sort of hang yourself. It's a statement that commits suicide. It can't fulfill its own standard. How so? There are no absolutes. That would be one example. That itself is an absolute statement. And just so you know, in logic, which is a branch of philosophy, remember we talk about that in the next hour, there's what they call guarding. What is guarding? Guarding, when you're speaking, is weakening your argument, making it less subject to attack. Weakening your argument or your statement, making it less subject to attack. So if you just says, well, for the most part, there are no absolutes, that's not self-refuting, right? And who does a lot of guarding? Attorneys. It's arguable that. Well, anything's arguable. But is it likely? It's arguable that, it's likely that. Those are examples of weakening your claims. And sometimes it's a good thing to weaken your claims, making them less subject to being shot down, right? Because if you say all Swedish people are idiots, and then you find one that's not, well, your whole claim is just going to be laughed at, you know? All right, social mores. If morality is reduced to social mores, and what is beneficial for the human community, then it's not really morality at all, but rather something that aims at furthering the cause of the human species. Right? That would be a sociological assessment tied to biological survival of the fittest. If you're saying torturing a 2-year-old for the mere fun of it is morally neutral, first of all, that's counterintuitive. That just screams falsity, doesn't it? Well, cannibalize someone homeless for fun after church. Why are you using such extreme examples? Because in logic, you push it to its logical extreme to see if it even has the ring of truth. But instead of talking about it for 4 weeks, we can just be done with it. If it's counterintuitive, morally repulsive, chances are we're out to lunch on that position. So if you say, well, morality changes from culture to culture, which is part of relativistic thinking and so forth, you can shoot a few of those one-liners at them, asking them, you know, is this and that morally neutral? Is torturing a 2-year-old for the mere fun of it morally neutral? What if we find a culture where rape, you know, is justified? Well, that's their ethic. Are you really going to say that? What about Sharia law? Ask the relativists in this country that are atheists if they want Sharia law here. It's just relativism, right? Who cares? That's their set of ethics. Keep it. It's not going to work very well, is it? So when someone says, well, these things are not, they're not moral abominations per se, you know, in light of Darwinism, which has progressed radically. When they're saying, you know, torturing a 2-year-old for the mere fun of it, it's not that it's a moral abomination, it's that it's not socially advantageous for the furtherance of the human species. Now you just left ethics. You're horsing around with sociology and biology, which has nothing to do with what's morally repulsive. You guys get that?
Yeah.
So social mores, remember that. It's also illusory, or in the sense that if ethics is merely relative and there are no absolutes, then morality is reduced to an illusion. I love this. What appears to be moral abominations are simply illusory. Now let me put something here in context. You've heard of existentialism, right? Jean-Paul Sartre from France, Albert Camus. Maybe you had to read that in college. Albert Camus, spelled Camus. You know, you open his book, The Stranger, and it begins, you know, since Mama died yesterday, and you're just like, what? I just had my cup of coffee. It's just, you know, just so down. You have, now there's also what they call Christian existentialism, thanks to my old neighbor, Søren Kierkegaard in Denmark. And he has to do with take a leap of faith because, you know, Genesis 22, if you recall, Abraham Isaac's story, you know, sometimes we just have to close our eyes, we don't know what's going on, and we just take a leap of faith in the dark. Well, I'm the guy that, if I'm in a high-rise, and the lights are shut off, and I hear the elevator door open, I will go like this to make sure there's a floor. I'm just not going to jump in and go, praise the Lord. No. So, but I guess, you know, Søren Kierkegaard would do that. Just jump in there, you know, excuse me, and hopefully there's a floor. So, Søren Kierkegaard was a brilliant man from Denmark, but he got us into trouble in some areas. Maybe we'll have time to talk about that in the next class that starts at midnight. Just joking. If ethics is illusory, for the existentialist, it would be. An existentialist is sort of like a byproduct of atheism. It's an atheistic worldview. Listen to this now. There are no laws, and that is what we call antinomianism. You've read about that. Yeah. Anti, against, right? And nomos in Greek is law. Nomos. So if you're an antinomian, you're against laws, well, you can be a moral relativist, but you don't have to be an anarchist, right? But you can, but how hard is it? I mean, can you really justify being against those who defend the anarchistic way of life if you're a relativist? Who are you to point the finger? Who are you to say no to the next guy? Remember, we have to tolerate other cultures and so forth. So if existentialism is true, here's the point where it's illusory. And let's see if this is intuitively true or counterintuitive, against your gut, just against your intuition. There are no moral absolutes, so says the relativist. Instead, what we have to do is sit around and invent laws to make society work. And by inventing these laws to make society work, really what you've done is you've created a theater on a world stage That is one big illusion. It's living as if there really is a right and wrong, but there really isn't. Excuse me. It is completely the world of being nuts. And so, if you ask them, is it even plausible, seemingly true, to maintain that all these laws are just invented for the benefit of for the furtherance of the human species? Or is it counterintuitive to say so? Yeah, torturing a 2-year-old for the mere fun of it is morally neutral. It's not an abomination. You should really go to Ludendorff if you start saying things like that, right? So if it's illusory, it really doesn't, I don't think it screams truth. It doesn't have the ring of truth to it in a nutshell. Let's pretend that they're real. Let's create a world where people have to be law-abiding citizens, but really they're just man-made. And remember last week when I alluded to that Harvard study, that there are absolute moral principles behind stop signs, yield signs, and speed limits. Even though we can up and down the speed limit, there's still a principle behind it, saying don't break the speed limit because you can kill people, and killing people is wrong. It's not just that it's not socially advantageous. All right, counterintuitive. Yet, this seems too contrary to human conviction and counterintuitive. It does not fit the facts universally. It's hard to find too many consistent relativists. You've all heard the pastors when they try to do this stuff, and what do they say? Well, the relativist is only a relativist till you steal his car, right? Then he wants justice. Find the thief, right? Same thing there. Doesn't fit the facts universally. Most people want justice. C.S. Lewis discovered, I mentioned this too, that generally speaking, moral absolutes are embedded in every culture, everywhere. For example, you will not find a culture where it's considered praiseworthy or morally right to run away in battle. You make a U-turn, I'm going home. I don't care.
Oh, France.
Craig, just for those viewers, says, what about France? What about France? All right, not to mention leaving one's comrades behind enemy lines. All right. What about presuppositions? Point 5. While the notion of moral reasoning proposes some standard that seems inherent in man, how could one not know what is crooked or wrong unless you have an idea of straight? Remember I talked about this prior classes, but for those of you that were not here, like you and Corey, is remember C.S. Lewis says you must presuppose an idea of what's straight. If not, you won't recognize what's crooked. Okay? Take that argument and think about perfection, right? We have an idea what a straight line is, but you don't have an idea what perfection. I mean, you have an idea what perfection is, but let me ask you this. Krista, you're writing like there's no tomorrow. Quick question for you. Do you see perfection anywhere in the world, except for Corey? Hear that laugh? I love it. That was brilliant. All right, so do you? You see no perfection, but you know what imperfection is. You have an idea. Well, imperfection is that which is not perfect, so obviously. So, but what is perfect? You have an idea of what it's about. Remember doctrine of analogies versus equivocation and univocality. That's where this is important. So think of C.S. Lewis. He's talking about straightness. You must have an idea of straight in order to know what's crooked. Apply that to the homosexual community. Hello. Right? They have an idea what it is to be straight and what it is to be crooked. Now, when we're talking about God, think of perfection and imperfection. This is more philosophy of religion or theology in a sense, but since we're on that point, exactly. So, put it this way. There are degrees, right? Real quick, so I don't bore those who have heard it before. There are degrees of perfection. We have the idea that God is perfect, right? We believe He is perfect, right? Yet He created a perfect garden, Garden of Eden. Don't tell me that Garden of Eden is perfect like God's nature. Oh, He created a perfect angel. What was his name? Lucifer, perfect in all his ways. And He created 2 perfect human beings, Adam and Eve. Can we agree on, I'll let you put a 1, 2, 3, 4 to that. Can we agree that God is probably the most perfect here? And Lucifer is probably a little more perfect than the garden because he has a will, right? Trees don't will. And Adam and Eve, probably more perfect, you know, than the trees in the Garden of Eden or whatever. So there are degrees of perfection, right? Here's what I'm submitting to you on this idea here. So separate now moral reasoning and think of God. An argument for God would be an argument from perfection. Because we have an idea of what is imperfect, we don't see around us what perfection is. We have an idea of it. If there are degrees of perfections, and we know what imperfection is, chances are that there is the most perfect. If not, we're completely lost at sea. We have no idea what we're talking about. And to deny imperfection and perfection also seems counterintuitive, just like it does when you apply it to ethics.
That would mean that there would have to be at some point in history that perfection entered into our world, right? Or else we wouldn't have known anyway.
No, I think it's part of being made in His image.
Right, that's what I mean from the original creation
Right.
and the law of
Right.
Moses and everything. That's when perfection entered in. Otherwise, we wouldn't know.
And it depends on which view you take of in theology here, right? Do you believe that in the Garden of Sweden, you know, that's the real place? I'm just kidding. In the Garden of Eden, that the image of God was completely erased or effaced? I don't believe that it was completely erased. We didn't even know it was up or down, left or right, including the loss of logic. You know, try to touch them. Moral reasoning, try to touch them. That's what separates you from a donkey running around in a field, right? We were made in His image. So I go with the view that the Imago Dei, the image of God, was not completely erased. It was effaced. So there's still enough there, still enough light to recognize good from evil without knowing the Torah. Okay? All right. So logical extreme. Well, I'm not going to talk about that because we've been doing that all day. Antinomianism, an overview of terms and moral systems. Talk about these. Antinomianism, again, no lawism or without law. Antinomas is instead of a law or against law, which is, again, antinomas. Situationism or situation ethics. This is not letting the situation determine what is right. That would be pragmatism. Whatever works, right? Pragmatic. On the contrary, situationism lies somewhere between antinomianism, no law, and legalism, laws for everything, which is why the situationist slips in right in between. Situationism from, for example, Joseph Fletcher, very smart man. Listen, if you didn't believe what you believe today and I asked you to create an ethical system, okay, you're either going to, listen, you got to give it to Fletcher or John Stuart Mill. I mean, the way they created all the stuff that you've been reading left and right, you still got to give it to them. I mean, you come up with if I said Christianity is not true, right, or Jesus rolled in here and says, I'm not it, you're like, well, who are you then? I'm just saying, if you found out for sure that there is no moral absolutes, all right, you try to create an ethic that is as involved as some of these guys. They were serious about their business. Now, maybe they cheated a little bit of counterintuitiveness, self-refutation, or they got so immersed in their own theory and trying to work out the kinks to make it work. So this guy, you know, I don't know about laws for everything, and I certainly don't want no law. That leads to anarchy and Sex Pistols, right? So we can't have that. Situationism for Fletcher, its main proponent has one law, and that is love. Wow, we kind of get that from some of the New Testament, don't we?
It's in parentheses though, which is a good idea.
Right?
Because love is not.
It's not a Christly agape love, is it? Right? But just on its face,
Yeah.
right? Hey, love is the ultimate principle for everything.
All you need is love.
All you need is love.
No, 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 no.
Yep. I'm glad you did it because I almost did. Kind of don't want that on tape. Generalism, three main schools of thought there. Utilitarianism. And I know the first time you read about that word, if it's new for you, it's just, wow, are we really getting into this? Well, the greatest good for the greatest number of people. All right? An act is judged by its results. They deny universals, but they're not antinomian. All right? Two, there's what's called act utilitarianism. Every moral act must be judged by its consequences. There may be exceptions to the rule, which in some case might justify some actions contrary to that rule. It's not fully, rules are meant to be broken. It's not fully that. 3, you have rule utilitarianism. Ethical rules and norms should never be broken. However, if the rules conflict, then one must be broken. All right? Now, let's move on to something very interesting here, and we'll develop these later, just so you've heard them. You need to know these terms. These are just good for your own growth, and if you have kids or are planning on having kids, these are things that you should know at the dinner table, because if they end up thinking about these things, you need to have an answer for them, so they don't become fideus. All right? So we have unqualified absolutism, unqualified absolutism, conflicting absolutism, and you have graded absolutism. I go with graded absolutism for a number of reasons. I think that there are some commandments that are greater than others. Can you think of one? Jesus says, I give you a greater commandment. What was that?
Laying your life down. Laying your life down for your brother.
There's another one. There's no greater love than that. So there are different notions of love, right? Love pizza, love my wife, love my lizard, love God. Well, different types of love there, right? I have a lizard. I named him Joe. He's cool. We're a bearded dragon.
Oh, cool. That's
Yeah.
cool.
I like that being
That's
now.
from Prehistoric Pets?
No, we got this at, where did I get it? I forgot.
You gotta take your cow over there.
Oh, I've taken him there. That monitor on the left is awesome.
Yeah.
If I was a millionaire, I'd have a monitor running around the backyard. Those things are cool.
A monitor.
Yeah.
Big giant lizard.
Giant lizard. You saw for Brooker's Prehistoric Pets. Like literally that big, and it sticks his tongue out this long. Yeah, that's cool. Huge snakes and everything. All right, we're boring the onliners, so the onliners like 909ers. All right. So graded absolutism, if Christ is saying, hey, look, I give you a greater commandment, there obviously would be lesser ones. All right? That would be one scriptural proof for that or proof text. Now, unqualified, listen now, says moral absolutes never conflict. Here's where the debate comes in. Just like you just saw on generalism, there are different types of utilitarianism, right? You have John Stuart Mill and steroids utilitarianism, and then you drop down, you have act utilitarianism, and then you get to rule utilitarianism. You know, in about 50 years, somebody's going to dream up at a German university some other type of deontological graded utilitarianism. It just continues to grow as philosophy gets richer in the world of ethics. So, what do we mean when we say moral absolutes conflict or they don't? Okay. We believe that truth-telling is a virtue. Should we always tell the truth? No. I just got fired. When the Nazis showed up, are the Jews in your house, Corey? Are you going to say, sure, they're upstairs hiding? Because you have to tell the truth. Thou shalt not lie. But if you tell the truth, 18 Jews are going straight to Auschwitz, thanks to you. So life-preserving is also a duty, right? Looking out for your kinsmen and, love your neighbor and all that stuff. Not betray your neighbor. So, which is it? So, the debate lies is how can you keep those absolutes when they seem to conflict? You ought to tell the truth. The Nazis are knocking at your door. Open the door. Brinkmann, do you have any Jude here? You're like, you looking all nervous. So if you lie and you have a poker face, you're twice as guilty, right? But now you're a Christian, right? Let's just say you're a Christian. I mean, utilitarians, they wouldn't have a problem, right? But the end justifies the means. You can lie all day long. No problem. But if you're an absolutist, separating that up and this down, this is within our circles. You're one or the other,
Yeah.
or one of these three.
Lying is a sin. It's always a sin. You can't make any exceptions. You can't sin.
No exception to it. So, just tell, God has to work it out. And as the Jews are coming down the stairs and they're hauled away, You look there, there's Down syndrome kids sitting in there. They're all headed for the slaughter. A few gypsies in the back and whatever. And you're just going, Lord will take care of them. Let's go have a barbecue. Let's go to the mall. So the unqualified absolutist says they never conflict. They only appear to do so. Now, why would they say so? Because they really want to stay true to absolutes. Scriptural truth is scriptural truth. And so I'm not sure really what's going on here. I'm just saying they never conflict. They just appear. Okay? You don't have to knock that idea down too hard if a person believes that. All right? Chances are you're not going to convert them because they're fine believers on either of these views, defending either one of them. Conflicting absolutism says moral absolutes can conflict. Sometimes they do. And when they do, no matter which way one goes, you're basically guilty. If you lie to preserve the Jews upstairs, as the Nazis are at your door, well, you're guilty. You live in a sinful world, and ask for forgiveness, and there you go. If you say, tell the truth, and you're not defending life-preserving, you're equally guilty. You're just guilty. Graded absolutism says no. We don't believe, and now some people will go, that's just semantics. I love that when they say, that's just semantics, Nick. No, it's the nature of thought. It's not semantics. You're flipping the tables on me. Yes, it's called logic and self-refutation. Not trying to be mean, but don't just say it's semantics when it's not. So you've heard this. We choose the lesser of two evils. Well, the conflicting absolutist might say so. If I tell the truth, well, 18 people will die. In my mind, I'm going to say, well, I think it's greater, but I'm not a great absolutist. I think it's greater for me to save 18 people and just, ask for forgiveness for not telling the truth. All right? So, in that sense, you could say you're choosing the lesser of two evils. Are you with me? Okay. That's not what graded absolutism is. As opposed to the lesser of two evils, this view approaches it differently. It's a greater good position. And this is where it gets tricky. And you have to really read up on graded absolutism in your book, read the chapter a few times to let it sink in, so you don't think it's just out in the left field. It asserts that moral absolutes at times may conflict, and when they do, one must choose the greater good, the greater two goods. It's not the lesser of two evils. If it's the lesser of two evils, it's still evil, no matter which way you choose.
Is it purple because that's your favorite?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. You're so funny. Now, it appears that appears to be a greater good. What does that say? Now, if what appears to be the greater good is the lesser evil, a person is guiltless in choosing the greater good or lesser evil, since it is impossible to keep both absolutes in conflict. I can't save the 14 Jews upstairs while telling the truth. I can't keep them both. And I don't want to be a sinner in telling the truth and sending them to the gas chamber. Can I keep both of these absolutes in a fallen world, in an imperfect world? Probably not.
Probably not.
And of course, the unqualified absolutist says, well, they just appear to conflict. They absolutely don't conflict. Maybe there's a third way. I just can't think of one, he says. And I've had students at high school to college saying, you know what, I just beat up the Gestapos. Okay, well, you end up in the gas chamber too, eventually. So, what do you do? Any Jews in the home? Do you lie, sin, tell the truth? What do? You choose the greater of two possible goods. Two possible goods. And since you can't keep both, you are exempt from keeping the lower by striving to keep the higher. I would say in the case of Nazi Germany, saving one Jew or 5 million Jews, however many, there's no number to it. That is a greater good than telling the truth to an enemy that's just out to kill you.
I got a question. Now, what about having the chance to assassinate Hitler, and you're saving countless people? Would that be considered taking the logic to the extreme?
Yeah, in one sense, yeah. Let me ask you this. What about dropping the bomb on Japan? What president authorized that? What was his name? Man, you guys are Americans, man. Come on. Truman, right? When he decided to drop the bomb in Japan, even to this day, you have sociology professors, historians just slamming that move. Well, let me tell you one thing. It ended the war really, really fast. And in ending the war really, really fast, it saved millions and millions and millions of people. Is that the end justifies the means? You think about that. But it's an interesting thing, right? Same thing. Had someone put a price on Hitler's head? I'm sure there was one. You know? Look, I'll just tell you right now, my grandfather was a Nazi. I've never said that where it's going to be online, but now it is. His name was Erich Brinkmann. You know? And, well, my family didn't talk about him very much. I'd have to go to Sweden, Norway, and Germany to get straight answers. And chances are, 9 out of 10, I'm not going to get any. You know? But it's real. And when you have Holocaust deniers talking about that, you know, no. That's all true, you know. When they invaded Norway, that's when he met my grandmother, and my dad was born out of that union, University of Oslo, chief of engineering, graduated that place very early, sailed the world, docked in Sweden, met my mom. I split when I'm 16, and I'm here. So, it's real, and let's just say somebody would have bribed him and says, shoot him. Well, you would have saved a lot of Jews, but not just Jews, other Europeans, Polacks, Italians, Gypsies. And had you done it before, say, Hitler handed his Mein Kampf to Stalin, you probably would have saved a lot of Russians or people in the Soviet Union. Mein Kampf, Origin of Species, and Mein Kampf, in those days they went together. Why not kill the lowest of the lowest on the totem pole?
Yeah. What about killing, for instance, an abortionist to save the thousands of babies and maybe even a few mothers that...
And our answer there lies...
his career.
Yep. Our answer there... We can get arrested for some of the stuff we're saying right now. Romans 13. Romans 13 is our Christian ethics answer to a lot of these things. But you understand why some would go to that extent. I just saved a bunch of kids, or Jews, or whatnot. Now let's say Obama, not that he will, just dropped a bomb in Iraq. Would that stop ISIS? Well, it would slow them down. Still in Syria, got them in Mexico, we got a few of them here, got them in Europe. It's the videos of beheadings and anti-America and anti-Israel, but sucking in Western Muslims that are becoming radicalized. You know, I guess, you know, if you're 16 and you watch somebody who's an American get their throat slit on TV, it's all good. You know what I mean? Sign up for that. Give meaning to my pathetic life living in London or whatever. But the end does not justify the means. We have to remember that. Now, you could say, just like Truman, hey, just drop a bomb on ISIS, just take him out, and you'll probably save a lot of people. Because if they're not stopped, how are you going to stop them? Negotiation?
No.
Scripture? Holy Spirit? Is he going to stop them? I mean, obviously he could, but will he? Holy Spirit didn't stop Hitler. I'm not being sarcastic here, I'm being very, very real. It's the spirit of the age, the spirit of Antichrist. I mean, he's alive and well, he's been here since the Garden of Eden. You take the idea that God is behind all this, you know. that ISIS has no free will whatsoever, and God is behind everything that is determined in the world, then God is behind ISIS as well. And Ted Bundy and the rest of them. Can't go that route either. So, you are exempted then, by saving the life of the Jew, you are exempt from the lower absolute of telling the truth, because God knows you can't keep both. So you're not doing anything wrong. You were put in that situation. You're trying to figure out what's best. You got less than 5 seconds to figure it out before you open the door. All right? Think of Annie and the Annex. Read that book. Go hear a Holocaust survivor talk about these things. There's not that many left. And they're talking about their kids and grandkids. Talk to the real deal. So, same thing. What do we do in war? We dress in camouflage. If you're Christian, should you do that? You're like, no, I want to wear a white suit. Because if I dress in camouflage, I'm really lying. I'm pretending to be the tree or part of the bush, and I don't want to deceive my enemy. So it's allowed in war. You're deceiving the enemy. Why? Because you don't owe the truth to the enemy. So think of Rambo. You saw Rambo when you were a kid, right? Remember Rocky? Adrian, right? So remember, Murdoch has the knife to Rambo's neck. Remember that guy? Murdoch, Rambo, that guy. I'm talking Rambo first blood or something. And let's just say he has a platoon outside. And that's you. And Murdoch says, where are your friends? And Rambo's like, hey, they're right outside, third bush to the left. And we're all wiped out, bless you. They're all wiped out. Or he just takes the pain. Now, ultimately, Rambo turns around and takes care of Murdoch, right? I'm quoting a movie like I'm old as a dinosaur, right? But I've been using that story for 20 years now, so it still works. But the point is, he does not owe the truth, some would say, in that situation. It's not situation ethics. You don't owe the truth to an enemy. So that would be war. What about sports? Basketball. Do we deceive there? Oh yeah, fake a shot. Shooting, I'm not shooting. Right? I'm going to run this way. I'm not dribble behind. I shoot it up there. You're deceiving your opponent. That's all right. What about UFC fights? Right? You throw a little kick down there and then you hit him with an elbow. You just tricked him. You can't deceive people in sports. We do it all the time, in sports and in war. And unfortunately, a lot of people do it in business. All right? I had a cancellation right now, Craig. You can come into the office. You know, guys got nothing to do. Give you a discount if you come in. All right? Now, what's your problem? And you counsel the guy for $300 an hour. Whatever. So, in any event, let's move on. Moral issues, we're not going to... Well, you know what? Let's just mention these, because this is where your book is headed. And chances are we're probably not going to get to every single chapter. All right? We'll do like 1 or 2 lectures on bioethics. Abortion, to abort the human entity residing in the womb. What's physician-assisted suicide? Comes from the Greek word euthanatos. I like physician-assisted suicide better than euthanasia. Some people go, what, youths in Asia? No, euthanasia. Euthanize them. Euthanatos in Greek, which means good or happy death. Capital punishment, to execute a prisoner guilty of a terrible crime. We talked about this last week, legislating morality. Remember, the relativists will say you can't legislate morality, and we said every single law is a legislature of morality. Hence the question is, should the government legislate morality? Yes. There are 3 offices in the land, by the way, that God has instituted. What's the first one? I'll throw the 3 out. Government, church, and family. So 3 offices in the land within the New Testament. Government, family, church. What order do you think they serve if we were to draw up a hierarchy of the 3? What would be first? Would it be family, church, and government? Or would it be church, government, church, family? What would be at the top?
Government, family, church, family.
The biblical view.
Church.
Huh?
Church.
Church is at the top?
Yeah.
Okay, some would say church, family, and government. Others would say family, church, and government. And we're supposed to abide by the laws of the land, right? But how do you protest if you're against the laws of the land? Well, that's where ethicists, specifically theologians, step in and go, well, you can't go wrong with what we call peaceful protest. You know, sitting on a curb in front of an abortion clinic, for example. Right? That would be civil protest in a very peaceful manner. But let's just say every Christian in America drove down to the Mexican border and just sat there like this, waiting for ICEs. That's probably not going to work very well, right? When they come across Juarez, you know, and into Texas, and there you are. Excuse us, we're just here to tell you we love you, and come on in, you know. Biomedical issues, medicinal issues concerning life and death. Very good stuff. Interesting stuff. Human cloning, the biological duplication of human beings. Did you hear about the micro human beings that I read an article on? They're trying to make like micro fake human beings, the little guys, mini humans, and they're, I guess the idea is to try out medicine on them and things like that. And, huh?
That's a horror movie.
That's a horror flick. Yeah. I've seen about getting one, and he can be my driver or my chef, you know. Yeah. Do my wife's laundry, so I don't have to do it. Ooh, did I say that? Yeah, I'm a good guy sometimes. All right. War. Are wars justified? There are unjustified wars and justified wars. Homosexuality, the union between two of the same sexes. Now, let me just tell you this. When you're talking about homosexuality, okay, oftentimes we're accused of being bigots, right? We're homophobes, intolerant, and so forth. Here's a few credit card answers, the quick ones that you can use. When someone calls you intolerant, ask them what's wrong with being intolerant. Come on, Corey. Tell me I'm intolerant.
You're intolerant. Man.
What's so wrong, Corey, about being intolerant?
Because you're not tolerating my intolerance.
No, I'm supposed to say that. I'm supposed to say it. That's the truth, though, right? If you're so tolerant, Mr. Jones, why don't you tolerate my intolerance? Oh, see, you're just like me. Okay, can we just set that aside right now and sit down and have a cup of coffee and debate the facts instead of throwing rocks at each other and spitting chewing gum? That's not doing anything, right? But the other way of doing it would be, you know, okay, I'll just do Mr. Jones, and Mr. Jones says to Betsy, you know what, it's wrong, you're so intolerant. And Betsy goes, sets him up, the Socratic question. What's wrong with being intolerant? Well, it's just wrong. Oh, so some things are really, really wrong then. But I thought you were a relativist. Further, why don't you tolerate my intolerance, right? You know, favorite verse for most relativists and atheists is, you know, don't judge. Don't judge. That's like the only Bible verse they know. Don't judge. You know what? If we're not supposed to judge, what was Paul doing in 1 Corinthians, 7, 8, 9? What is he doing there? If you do any of these things, you're worthy of death. And he goes down the list.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, oh dear, am I there somewhere?
Yes, you are.
Right? You're worthy of death if you do these things. So when it says over here, thou shalt not judge, or you shouldn't judge, right? What is Paul doing?
Judging.
He's judging, and it's pretty heavy. And if you believe in divine inspiration, and illumination by the Holy Spirit, and you believe in inerrancy, is God speaking on both sides of his mouth? No. And some would even say, regardless of what Paul does, we're fruit inspectors. No, I can judge. And I don't tolerate dumb ideas. All ideas are not equal. If you believe that Jesus came from another planet, I don't have to tolerate that. Because he was a Jew. He was not a Martian. Scientology, hello? So, you don't have to tolerate everything. Nobody's fully tolerant. And when someone accuses you of being, a homophobe, okay, let's just separate those words. What does homos mean? Homo means the same, right? What does phobia mean? Comes from phobos. It means three things. It means hatred, fear, or irrational fear. Hatred, fear, irrational fear. Listen, I'm not afraid of the gay rights movement. Like I'm all scared at my house. But I'll tell you one thing. If I lived in an apartment and I had somebody that was homosexual living next to me, I'll tell you what, there is something that would harm me, knowing what goes on in that apartment. It's just, that would harm me in here somehow. But I wouldn't be afraid. You know what I mean? Furthermore, if I have good arguments against the practice, and I'm talking social reasons, right? We're not talking about Bible right now. Biological reasons, health consequences to that practice, that's not irrational fear. That's called prudence. If it's true that HIV can live in a freezer, and you can't freeze it in 7 days, or say you go to a restroom at a mall, and someone walks in there and cleans the restroom at night the next day, if it's true what some of these doctors are saying out there, that AIDS can live on a dry surface, whether you clean it or not for 7 days, that's sort of like, it's probably not that socially healthy. Now, if you wanted to play games like this name-calling stuff, you're a homophobe and so forth, just tell them, well, you're homophobia-phobic. What did that accomplish? You're afraid of homophobes. So, what did we accomplish now? Nothing. Can we debate the facts now? So, I'm not fearful, phobia. I don't have irrational fear, and I certainly don't hate you. And we have to keep this in perspective here. When in the book of James, we're told that out of the same mouth we can curse men, right, and bless God. Why do you think James is going so hard with that theme? Because we're not even supposed to curse pagans. Even homosexuals have the stamp of the image of God. When I say even, it includes all of them. Radical Muslims have the stamp of God upon them, right? Now, you can hate what ISIS is doing, right? And to a certain point, you can go, well, I hate every bone in that person's body because they just have a disgrace for humanity. They have no ethic. I mean, it's Mein Kampf, if anything, you know? So, keep those things in mind. Tolerance, right? Why don't you tolerate my intolerance? Let's debate the facts. It's not irrational fear. It's not hatred. It's not really bigotry either. You know, here's one case in point. I had a gay sociologist, professor of mine, and I mentioned this to some of you in the past. He essentially says, look, you shouldn't be out there judging other cultures because, you know, each culture has their own ethic. This sounds straight secular college, right? And it was. And so, you know, morality is reduced to social mores, etc. He's doing that whole thing. He's a sociologist, not a philosopher, so he's not paying attention to some of the hiccups that I think was inherent in his talk. And most people pursuing an AA at that level are not going to challenge him. They absorb it either as doctrine, right, or they go home and talk to their parents, and the parents either has the answer or they don't. And that's what's going to keep them in the faith or not. Yes. So I said, I raised my hand up. I said, let me ask you a question. You mentioned that we're not supposed to be judgmental of other cultures. I didn't drop Nazi Germany on him. I didn't drop Jonestown. I didn't mention David Koresh. I was in secularist college. That's when that stuff was going on. But I did say, I said, because there are so many cultures in the world, let's just reduce the entire globe to 3 cultures. 3 cultures. And one is just rampant cannibalism, human sacrifice. I mean, every ethic known to the relativist is being violated. That would be sarcasm. Right? That's culture A. Culture B is, they believe that culture A is completely out to lunch. And then you have culture C. So one culture says, you know what, we're going to kill, destroy, we're Canaanites, we're this, we're just going to engage in, you know, pornography, polygamy, rape, incest, cannibalism, you name it. Every cultic practice is within culture number 1. Number 2 doesn't care at all what culture 1 is doing. They're sort of like just in their own world, right? Who am I to judge?
Do they live near each other?
Well, just to say there's a border between them, right? Yeah, like Memphis and Kentucky, right there. You're standing on an intersection. You've been in 3 states at the same time. But culture 1 does whatever they want. Culture 2 says, I don't care what they do. We do what we want to do. Well, we certainly wouldn't do that. If you want to have an abortion, that's fine. If you want to marry a guy, you can be homosexual. I personally wouldn't do it, because I'm heterosexual. And then you got culture 3 over here. And culture 3 says culture 2 and culture 1 are both out to lunch. Because culture 2 is, live and let live, and, man is the measure of all things. We've heard of that statement by the philosophers. And so we think culture 1 is absolutely morally depraved, and culture 2 are completely stupid. I said, Professor, I said it faster than this. I said, is culture 3 right or wrong? He goes, they're wrong. Culture 3 should not judge culture 2 and 1. I said, oh, so some cultures are really wrong then. You just said 5 minutes before no culture is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Social relativism, ethical relativism. So instead of talking about all these cultures in the world, we go dizzy, right? Reduce it down to 3. Is 3 right or wrong? Setting him up, he goes, they're dead wrong. Shouldn't judge culture 1 because they have their own ethic. Oh, so some cultures are wrong then. Do we got that? All right, we'll talk about civil disobedience. We'll talk about marriage and divorce, ecology, the human role in planetary preservation and care. Probably not going to do too much in ecology. You guys can read Francis Schaeffer on that. Romans 3, what's a Christian duty? Okay, we're going to move on to philosophy, and then we'll go home. We won't cover as much in philosophy. You only have 20 minutes. So maybe I'll drop in an extra lecture by Friday that'll be uploaded to make up for it. We'll do something. And Corey, you're not allowed to lead. Corey's going to watch this tape when he's like 60. He goes, that was me.